Hi, this is Suzanne in Ohio. Well, I'm back with the next in our series of Paint with Me. Now, if you didn't catch the first one, go back and watch that one, and you'll know where we're at in this process. So, I spoke to you about making yourself a painting board, and I don't have one small enough to work right here. So I'm turning this piece of freezer paper over to the shiny side, and I'm going to pretend like that's my painting board. And then here's my piece of canvas where we drew a simple holly leaf on here. And go back and watch the other video and you'll realize we used this disappearing marking pen by Pilot. It's called Frixion, and all these marks will disappear. It's just a guideline to go by for right now. But let me say a little bit about the canvas we're working on, because I forgot to talk about that again in the former video. All right, so I had said a couple videos back that I used a couple different kind of canvases. Now this is just canvas fabric. It's not artist canvas, but it's right in the fabric store where you'll find muslin and different things like that. Tried the one at Joann's, and although it looked fine, what happened was after I pre-shrunk it, it ended up with some kind of ridges in it from the warp threads or something like that, and that wasn't quite smooth enough for me. So I tried the one I found at Walmart, and boy, I love that. So I just shrink it by wetting the whole thing, hanging it outside in the sun, or you can put it in your dryer, but I don't like the wrinkles that it creates. Now, another word about wrinkles. Canvas is odd in that if you create a real firm wrinkle in it, something like pressing, this in here, you're going to have to use water to iron that back out again. Canvas holds on to whatever marks, wrinkles, and shapes that you put in it. All right, so another thing was there is a right and wrong side. If you look at a piece of canvas, which is essentially a lightweight denim type thing, you'll see that one side, and I know you can't see it on here, but you can see plainly that the threads go horizontal or perpendicular depending on which way you have your fabric laying. On the other side, it tends to have more of a slight herringbone look. That's the actual right side. And I like to be sure and paint on that because I like the texture that it helps to give my painting. All right, now I did not pre-do anything other than get my thoughts together, and I thought on this one we should also paint some holly berries, just because that will give us another color to work with and another little lesson about shading. And I'm just sketching these on here because this is just practice, and that's what we're going to consider it. Now we talked about, I mentioned brushes in the last video, so now let's look at some of them. I told you all I did was buy a cheap set from Joann's. Some of them were fine, and some of them were trash. So I know I have one in here somewhere. These have to be a couple of my sisters, but this is a good one to talk about right here. So let me show you this brush, and I want you to see how wobbly, and I don't know what to call it. This brush won't even hardly absorb any water. The water just kind of rolls right off it, and as soon as these bristles get wet, they turn into something like a wet mop. I would have no use for a brush like that. So check your bristles and just lay those aside. Like this one, I can tell, same thing. And let me point out some of the other kinds here. Of course, in that set, oh, wait a minute, I've got some wet ones here I want to show you also. Here's some. And I found quite a good use for these. And then I had a junk brush, I called it this one, which was some kind of bristle, boar bristle kind of thing, but it was white. So maybe fake acrylic, I don't know. But what I did was I cut into these bristles to thin them out so that I could use them with a light stroke and make streaky highlights or whatever. I had a couple other brushes I gave a little haircut to also. If you've got a cheap paintbrush, don't be afraid to alter the tips of it for what you are doing and what you need. You can always get more. All right, so these are the ones that we're going to select from. All that you see here, I never know what I'm going to pull out of the jar, but so I've got a cup of water here. I've got my brushes, and because we're doing a holly leaf, I'm just going to go into my stash here, and I'm going to pull out some. Now that says forest green, and let's put a little dab of that out. And because I might want to lighten it, I'll use this little chartreuse green I've got. Put a little dab of that out. I could lighten it myself with some white and some yellow, but let's put a little black out here because I will want to darken that green. Now you can darken your green with blue or brown or whatever is opposite green on the color scale. You can also use that. If I add this blue, it's going to become a very blue-green. So let's talk a minute about the color scale. And then what I just said about you can darken it with whatever is opposite on the color scale. So let's do a simple color scale here. And we know we have 3 primary colors: red, yellow, and blue. Now green is the secondary color, which is mixed from blue and yellow. So this becomes green. And what does this become? Whoop, I should do a triangle. Red and yellow make what? Orange. Okay, and blue and green, or blue and red, what does that make? Purple. Okay, so there's our primary, secondary, and then these colors in between are called tertiary colors. And we don't need to really talk about those for right now. But if I have a green and I want to make it darker, but I don't want to change it to a blue-green or a yellow-green, I can take a dab of red and add to my green, and that makes me a dark green because red is directly opposite on the color scale from green. And let's talk about purple. Let's say I have a purple and I want to dull it down a little bit. What's opposite on the color scale? Yellow. Now we use this principle in hair coloring because if your hair color ends up too yellow or too gold, we add a little purple to it and that tones down the yellow. So you can see how that concept works. So let's get a dab of red out here. See what kind of reds I have. Well, I got one that says Christmas red. So we'll just take a drop of that. This is an old tube, so it doesn't want to come out. That's good. Okay, so I've got my paints on my plate. And the next thing I'm going to do is give myself a dab of water so I don't have to keep reaching in my cup. All right, now remember, this is actually my painting board. I'll lay my canvas on my painting board, and then we're going to start mixing up some paints. So my first approach here, I'm sorry about this autofocus. It keeps moving around. Let me move you out a little bit and see if that'll quit doing that. All right, so I'm going to choose a brush, and what I know that I want to do is I want to put an underpainting on everything. So if I want to paint this leaf, it's basically a green leaf. I want to make sure that I choose a lighter green, because I can always cover up the lighter, and well, that kind of is a misleading statement. On acrylics, you can put light over dark, but my approach right now is to give myself a light to a medium green as my underpainting. And on this one, a light red, not pink, but just a thin down red. So because I have such a big area to paint, I can choose kind of a bigger brush. And let's see what I want to do here. I could even use this giant brush. I'll do part of it with this so that you can see that, and then we'll do part of it with a smaller brush. So I'm going to pull a little bit of my paint over here with a very watery brush, and I want to get it to not as thick as cream and not as thin as water. And then I want to squeegee out some of that moisture. So I push my brush down. And then my goal here is to go around my edges and not necessarily fill it in totally solid, but to get an underpainting on it. So I'm just going to put my brush down and see what it wants to do and create an edge. That's a very Christmassy green, but I can adjust that later on. Now I want to get some water on that. I better move my water because my arm is always getting in your way. I'm going to add some water to it and pull it out here because I don't want it to dry with those hard edges on there. And if I've got enough moisture, I'll just move it around. Now if your paint's not too thin, it'll stay pretty much in the lines that you've created in the edges. So there's about half of it with a very large brush. So let's let me see if I can get some better lighting. I'm not sure how the lighting is working. Again, I'm in a temporary setup, so let's go to a little smaller brush, which you might have, and let's see. This is just a flat edge brush, and that should work pretty good. And we'll just create an edge here. And because this brush doesn't hold as much liquid, I might not get as much paint around the edge. And then you just make a line. I want you to pretend like you're coloring in a coloring book. It is so easy. And this is a funny little story I have. When I was a child, I got a coloring book and crayons. We always had that. We didn't have much else available to us, but we always had paper and pencil, and most of the time coloring book and crayons. And I decided one time I was going to do my whole coloring book by just outlining all the shapes with my crayons with real dark colors. And I was so proud of that coloring book. And one time my cousin came to visit us, and she wasn't in school, of course, but I was, and my mom let her fill in my entire coloring book with crayons that day. I was so upset. And then as I got older, I was ashamed of myself because I'm sure that little girl didn't even have a coloring book and crayons, and she needed something to do. But I love that solid dark outline. It's not always necessary, but it works good for this. Now you can see here I've got a lighter area, and I did not bother filling that in with paint. That might end up actually being a highlight area for me. So I'm going to leave that. Now let's go on to our berries, and I'm going to turn this so it's more in your screen area. And then we're going to do pretty much the same. Now I don't even have to wash my brush. I'm just going to pull out a little bit of red and thin it down, get it nice and creamy with some water. And because it is the smaller space, I'm going to stick with this brush. Although you could use anything. Here's a nice brush. Soft, pointy. You know, I should really learn. This is a round brush. I think is this a filbert? I'm talking about stuff I don't really know. But either one of these brushes would work. But let's go ahead and stick with this one. And let's do an outline here. You can see right here, my edges are not totally solid because this brush does not hold a lot of moisture. But now that red's a little bit dark, but it's just fine because we can adjust it. Now I'm just going to add some water. And all I want to do is smush around a little bit and get rid of that hard line. Now, this is a good time to say what I did when I had more than one image. If you look back or go to my Etsy site and look at my pillow fronts really close, you'll see that I left a negative space in between all the elements of my images. One I did not, but I found, since I'm not a real painter professional, that this was easier for me just to leave that tiny little highlight there in between those images. So I'm not going to fill that in. Now I've got a nice outline. I'm going to add some water and let it bleed into itself a little bit and get rid of that hard line. Okay, one more. And for that one, let me bring it down real close. And let's smush up just a little bit more paint. Now, if you have a hard time going around these lines, and I'm working at an awkward angle, switch brushes. And just leave a tiny little highlight there, which you can see I already messed up. This is our practice and our demonstration, so we're okay with however it comes out. Little water. Don't swish your brush out, just put it in there and get some water. Now acrylics get darker as they dry, so you do want to take that into account. Now look what that leaf did right here. Some of the moisture seeped into this area and took away a few of my highlights. I don't care a bit. I'm leaving it just the way it is. All right, now holly, this is a green, almost like a Kelly green or shamrock green, and holly is a little bit more of a blue-green. So we're going back to our tray. I'll let this dry a little bit. We're going back to our tray, and we're going to add a little bit of blue to some green. Put some water in with it. You can see I'm working on a paper plate. It's a wonderful way to work surface because I can cover it with saran wrap, keep my paints wet. I can spritz water right on it. And when I've used up all the usable paint, I can just throw it away. I love that. So it's a little bit more water. Scoot that water over there. Now this is obviously a darker blue or green, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right up close to the edges. I'm working opposite this camera, so I'm not sure which is right until I look at the screen. Okay, so I'm going to apply this blue-green right up to the edge and right over top, and it darkens itself in. Now I want to add some water and encourage that blue to just seep out, that blue-green to seep out into this Kelly green, Christmas green, whatever they called it. And some of this still has enough moisture. See that green creeping out into there? And I don't have to try to over manipulate it or anything. Now I'm kind of happy with that because I have dark, medium, light. But I want to accentuate this center vein, and I'm just going to put a streak of blue. Now it's going to fade out because this whole area is still damp, but I want to encourage it to come over here on one side. So let's put a little bit more water, a little bit of that, and just encourage it as if there's a shadow in there. Now, as far as painting goes, I don't know how well you can see it on the screen. You could almost leave your design in this state, other than putting some highlights in it. But we don't really want to do anything more, even though we want to take it further. We don't want to do anything more until that dries. Now, I won't be able to edit this video, so I'm just going to have to break there with that one and let that dry, and then when we come back the next time, I'll show you about putting more shadows and more highlights. And then, voila, that part is going to be done. Now, even the berries don't look bad, but let's see if we can get a little bit more shadow. Now, remember what we said with our color wheel? What is opposite red on the color wheel? Green. So if I take my green, I got some green over here, put it right here in this puddle of red, then basically, look at that, I have dark red. And that's what I'm going to use for my shadows. Let's get a little bit more water. And then keep adding until you get the exact shade. That right there is a nice brick burnt red. And I can use that color to shadow my berries. So shadowing berries are tricky. This one has a light center coming right in the middle. That means the light is coming straight down. But if you want it to look like the light is coming from a different direction, then make all your light areas off to one side. I'm not that good of a painter, and I'm not going to worry about it as long as I get the impression that I want. That's what I care about. So there'll be a darker shadow on one side and a smaller, skinnier shadow on the other. And to blend that out, I'm just going to add the water. I don't want to add anything else. Look at there. Now, I'll put a touch of bright red over top of this while it's wet because the two will blend. It's a wonderful thing about acrylics. You can actually blend your colors right on the piece. And because berries are bright, I'm going to add a little bit more. Now, when we come back, when it's dry, and add highlights, it will come alive. All right, so there our berry is shaded around the outside. So let's do that with the other ones. And we want to take note that, get some green. I'm mixing color over here. Oh, I'm so sorry. I have a little puddle more of this dark green. I'm going to add, or dark red, I'm going to add some green to it. Yeah, you have to keep mixing because not only do you have to get the right color, you have to get the right consistency. So that's a beautiful burgundy brick red right there. And I'm going to put that, a small line of it, on this berry right up next to the other one because that's where the shading is. And you can see it's already blending itself out. Now this berry will have one predominantly dark side and then a tiny little shadow, perhaps right here. And that's enough. So I'm going to get some water on my brush, and all I'm going to do is come back with enough moisture to give that some moisture there so it can start to bleed together. Now, don't try to make every single element in your painting all alike. That would take all the interest away from it. So let's just get some shadow up next to this little guy. And because I messed it up the first time because I wasn't at the right angle, but let's put a tiny shadow here and a little shadow here. And then let's leave that berry with a lot of the lighter color. Now again, this is your starting point. You're going to come back with paint over this a few more times, and it's so easy. Once you get in the rhythm, you just won't believe it. Painting in this technique is about layers. All right, so there you have our beginning stages. If you're going to paint along with me, I encourage you to get a couple scraps of a canvas type fabric. It can even be cotton duck. It can be anything that's heavier and sturdier than, you don't want muslin that pulls the water too quick. You don't want anything too thin. You want something with some real body to it. You can also paint on dark fabric. And maybe in this series we'll do that with something. So there you have your first elements. And we can let that dry in the sun or naturally, or here's a trick. You can take it to your ironing board, and because you don't want to mess up your ironing board, lay a piece of parchment down. And then sandwich this piece of canvas in between paper towels. 2 thicknesses on the bottom, 2 thicknesses on the top, and then iron it. And what that does is that pulls the moisture out of the fabric, heats it up, and helps it dry faster. All right, folks, I'm so glad you're watching, and I hope you're painting along with me. And let me know what you think, and we'll get on to the next stage real soon. Thank you. Bye.